All right, guys. Well, let's move into stock up, stock down, and we're definitely wanting to carry this throughout the off season. I don't know that it's going to be a series over the next couple of weeks, but we want to dabble with it. And like we say, as we get more news and information on some of these programs, start to kind of formulate opinions about where we think they're going to be in 2023. So we'll run through our stock up teams first, then we'll go through stock down. I want to say from the outset, honorary stock up to Florida State. I don't know that we need to cover them right now, but Knowles coin is going to the moon. I have been an investor from the ground floor. Norvell has taken me to the promised land, and I'll remember everybody else when I'm rich and famous off Knowles coin. So honorary stock up to them. We'll talk Knowles later on. Trey, you mentioned Washington is turning this around, and that's my first stock up. Washington, to me, has a very clear path to contending in the Pac-12 this next season. Heck, they did it this year. It was because of a tiebreaker that they didn't get to play for the Pac-12 championship this season. For me, Kalen
Still bitter
DeBoer.
about that, by the way. That
Oh,
was
I
just
know.
ridiculous.
I'm right there with you. I would have liked to see a little bit of purple rain in Vegas. Shout out Prince. Kalen DeBoer is legit. I think we got tastes of this at Fresno State, but then again, at the group of five level, you never really know how a coach is going to move over. In fact, one of the teams that I'm going to talk about in stock down in Gainesville, Billy Napier hadn't exactly made that transition super seamlessly. So for Kalen to come in and have as impressive a first year as he did at Washington, I'm really excited about what the Huskies can do. Michael Penix Jr. is a legit Heisman contender, led the country in passing yards, and didn't turn the football over. He didn't turn it over. He stayed healthy. Those were the two question marks that he had at Indiana. Now, can he do that again in 2023? I mean, we can hope he stays healthy. We can hope that he produces like he did last season. But there's nothing that you saw from his on-field performance that would give you a reason to doubt, right? Give you a reason to go, nah, I didn't see this from him. He answered a lot of questions this past season. So for me, that offense is going to be a ton of fun. Washington also is really seeming to recruit good again. They've always had kind of that 1 5-star that seems to come in per class, and it's typically been at the quarterback spot, but they haven't developed those quarterbacks. Jimmy Lake, Chris Peterson, really at the end of his reign, kind of stopped developing quarterbacks. I think Jake Locker might have been the last, successful one. And then Jimmy Lake had a cup of coffee there, so he had no chance to do that. So for DeBoer to get a transfer quarterback in Penix, I think is huge. They just got Austin Mack, who's a 4-star quarterback, to reclassify from 2024 to 2023. For me, all arrows are pointing up. I think if you're not on the Washington bandwagon, seats are limited, right? I mean, like, call now. Be one of the first 10 callers to reserve your spot because they're going quick. I really like the direction Washington's headed.
Yeah, well, and not just that, they have a pair of really good wide receivers too. That I saw them, in the Alamo Bowl when we watched that one, and that was a lot of fun to see. And to be able to have really talented wide receivers for Penix to throw the ball to is awesome. I've seen a couple of them end up on those way too early Blitnikoff Award, that kind of thing. So it would be really interesting to see how that ends up for them. And I really do like the way that Washington is taking their program right now. I think you're right, Mitch. I think that whatever conference they end up in long term, I think that they're going to be a staple for a while with DeBoer at the helm.
Yeah, no complaints from me about this pick. I think they're going to challenge for the Pac-12 title this year and really push for the Rose Bowl, if not the playoff. I think that could really see. They've got the quarterback to do it. They've got the defense to do it. They could be really, really fun this year.
Yeah, I hope so. I think they're a fun team to watch. Let's stay up north. Let's go to the Beaver State, and whichever one of you guys wants to go first. You kind of got opposite teams on the end of the Platypus Cup rivalry. So take me inside why, I guess, Garrett, let's start with you. Take me inside why Oregon has their stock up, and then Trey, go ahead and follow him up.
Yeah, well, Mitch, I'm kind of in the same spot as you. I think Oregon, you can almost copy paste what Washington's doing, right? You get a new coach, Dan Lanning. Great hire for the team. They go 10-3. They win their bowl game. They were in the hunt for the conference until the very, very end of the season. They get Bo Nix back after his resurgent year. I think that's huge for them next year, is getting their quarterback, back after they get him to transfer in again from a program where things weren't working out, resurges their career. And then I think, the big thing for Oregon right now is they're just kind of building their brand back up to where they were before the kind of slump that they had there. And kind of making people think again, like, hey, Oregon's kind of back on the scene, recruiting decently well. They're playing good football. And I think that's the big thing for the Ducks is not just to play well, because they've always had a pretty solid team that can compete. But it wasn't really until that, sort of early 2010s era when they started to see that take off with guys like Mariota and really see that stock take off. I think Dan Lanning's the guy to get him back, and I think they're going to do it pretty quick.
Yeah, and this kind of goes into what I was going to say with Oregon State. It's such a shame that as we're seeing all of these programs kind of have a renaissance moment, right? The Beavers, we have Colorado, we have Oregon, we have Washington, USC coming back. Obviously, they're leaving, but just such a bummer that their conference is fumbling
Yeah.
its bag. Like, right? Like, because there's going to be so much entertaining football to be had out on the West Coast over the next, I don't know, 4 or 5 years. There's been entertaining teams for the past decade. They haven't been nationally elite, but they've been super entertaining, super fun to watch. And we just couldn't watch them because they're buried on the Pac 12 network that no one gets. So, yeah, like Oregon is another one of those teams. They are looking like they're in the right direction. I'll go ahead and transition us over to the other side of that rivalry, though, because I think, Oregon, they're not a blue blood of college football, but they've certainly, since at least the mid 2000s, been a player on the national scene. They have a lot of backing from Nike, obviously. Oregon State, they've had their moments, they've had their years, but the depths that program had fallen to, like if you would have bought stock in Oregon State a couple of years ago, you're paying like a penny, maybe even less than a penny, right?
Mm-hmm.
And now that stock, you talk about stocks going to the moon. Usually when you see a school hire an alum, sometimes that's kind of a cop out. But Jonathan Smith, man, they're in the depths when he's hired. He weathers that storm for a couple years, and now he wins 10 games in 2022. And the fans are starting to believe. They're starting to believe in the program that he's building. They're starting to believe in, everything that he's doing over in Corvallis. There's more money being poured into that program. They're completely redoing the stadium. If you didn't watch any of their games this year, they played home games in a half-finished stadium. Still did really, really well at home. And look, they are doing all of that without any blue chip recruits. Like they're signing maybe, I think the stat was he signed his first one this offseason.
Yeah.
Correct? Yeah. So no blue chip recruits, no highly regarded talent coming into that program. He's coaching them up and they're winning football games. And it's going to be fascinating to see how this rivalry develops. I don't think that Oregon State will necessarily overtake Oregon in the near future, but man, they've had success in the other big three men's sports, right? They've gone to Elite Eights in basketball. They've won national championships in baseball. You can win in Corvallis. You can get athletes there. You can recruit. And so I'm really excited to see if Jonathan Smith can keep upping that game of recruiting and start to really compete with the top of the Pac-12.
Yeah, recruits would be huge because you're right. He was the only Power 5 head coach since he took over in 2018 to not have a blue chip or a 4-star or better commit to the program. So he's done all of this developing with 3 stars. And then this past year, I believe he got 2 of them. He got 2 4-stars to come in. So, Smith is creating a name for himself as a developmental guy. And I think the success on the field is impressive. The success off the field, getting belief back in that Beavers program that used to be a doormat, right? For the Pac-12 North, like you came into Corvallis or you had Oregon State coming in on homecoming and you were just already penciling in a win. And now the Beavers are a team that you absolutely have to take seriously, can and will make you pay if you underestimate them. So I love both of those picks up in Oregon. Let's come back down to the South for my second stock up. I'm going to go with the Texas Longhorns. Now, listen, if you're going Mitch, we do this every year, buddy. Every year, Texas is one of the top 5 teams that has stock up. I hear you. I do. Let me tell you why I believe that Texas can turn the corner this year. Recruiting and that culture has always been more about, not always, has recently been more about sizzle than actual steak, right? Since their national championship appearance in 2009, since they let Mac Brown go, it's been 40 years in the wilderness, right? All the talent in the world, all the money in the world has poured into that program. And then, you you're missing a bowl game basically every other year. And so since Sarkisian came in, he missed the bowl game in year one. Obviously, goes 8-4 last year. The signs of life are there. The recruiting specifically for me is what makes me believe in this team in his third year. He's transitioned that recruiting base to focus on the trenches, to focus on being physical. They just took 4 of the top linebackers in the country this cycle. Sarkisian is focused on being tough, on winning at the line of scrimmage and imposing their will on you. Now, do they need to get better in the pass rush? Absolutely. But the secondary really stepped up this past year and looked like they could be an above average defense. That's been the knock on Texas for the last several years is, hey, they can score points, but their defense is for sure going to give it all up in the fourth quarter. Now it's almost the opposite, where you're moving on from Bijan Robinson and Roschon Johnson. You've still got a very, very talented wide receiver core. Do you have the quarterback that can make all of that sing? And so for me, the quarterback is the biggest question for Texas. I do think Quinn Ewers is going to have development steps forward in this now his second year at the program, because guys, remember, before playing at Texas, he hadn't played a full season of football since his junior year at South Lake Carroll. He skips his senior season. He goes to Ohio State. I think he had 2 or 3 snaps and then comes to Texas. And it was kind of like being anointed king as, an 8-year-old, right? I mean, you don't have the skins on the wall to take over and lead immediately. He's been through a first campaign. He's been through the highs. He's been through the lows. I really do expect that Quinn takes a step forward. And if not, Texas has all the quarterback darts to throw. They've got Malik Murphy there. They've got, obviously, Arch Manning there. Would it be a little too soon for me to put him in? Absolutely. But there's enough talent in that quarterback room that I think Sark has to have somebody that can run that offense and get that team to 9-10 wins and competing for a Big 12 title.
So, Mitch, are you saying that Texas is back?
I'm not saying that yet. I'm just saying they're trending in a positive direction, right? Like Dow is up 2-3% on the Longhorns today.
Yeah, no, the only reason I have anything to pause on with the Horns is because of Bijan Robinson leaving, right? If you can replace him, I think that you can, and replace him is a very loose term here. We mean get a running back who can play well, right? You can't replace Bijan Robinson. That's just not what you do with the elite level running back like that. But if you can get a guy to come in and catch some balls out of the backfield, play really well, keep a defense honest at the very least, I think you're right. I think they got plenty of talent there. Quarterback development, we'll see if Quinn can keep it consistent. We'll see what they have with Arch Manning in terms of how far along his development has gone. I still have some question marks there to see where he ends up ultimately, but I do think you're right. I think the Longhorns have been doing a lot better at, being strong on the trenches, and they're going to have to be with this move to the SEC coming up. You're going to have to win a lot more games in the trenches than you might be able to get away with in a Big 12 conference.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're absolutely right on the trenches, guys. And Kyle Flood was the best possible hire that Steve Sarkisian could have, because he is actually recruiting O-linemen now. That was not a thing under Tom Herman and Charlie Strong. For the most part, they were not getting blue chip O-linemen, and you could see it. Their quarterbacks could not get the ball out of their hands because they were being blitzed. I know that was our big concern coming in, was will the offensive line hold up when they were looking at playing 3 or 4 freshmen. When you plug in 4 and 5-star freshmen, you have a much better chance. And it wasn't perfect, but those guys are going to continue to grow. But man, guys, Bijan was the offense last year. Like, can we agree on that?
Yeah.
It's going to be scary to see. I think if you're a Texas fan, and if you're honest with yourself, when the game was on Quinn's shoulders last year, he was not ready for that moment. And I know that he's going to continue to grow and mature. He's a talented guy. It's make or break it time earlier in the year. And then he's going to have some pressure looking behind him, looking at Arch Manning, looking at the rest of the QBs in that room, because there will be options this year, and it's going to be fascinating to me. I don't know that I'm ready to buy on Texas quite yet.
I mean, that's totally fair. I think, like I said, we do this every year. I think this year, maybe some of the signs of life are there, but at the end of the day, if this team finds a way to go 8-4, 7-5, would I be shocked? No, just because that's the pattern, right? That's what they've been doing for these last several years.
I think that's my biggest hesitation is just the fact that, yeah, we kind of do this every year.
Yeah.
And that was the joke with his Texas back, right? It seems like every year we have a Texas is back moment, and then we have to go and sit down again. I mean, this year it was the fact that they held Bama to a really close game and they escaped Austin. And then
Sure.
we found out maybe Bama wasn't quite as good as they were in previous years. And, Texas maybe didn't ever quite get back up to that point throughout their season. So,
Hmm.
um, yeah, I think that's my biggest cause for pause is just like, man, can they do it this year? Like, can they actually like show some promise and then deliver on that promise in the season? I'll be waiting to see if that can even happen. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
sure that they can do it. We're just waiting to see if it will happen.
Now, a team that you are bullish on that we were talking beforehand, I thought about including this team, and I'm curious to hear why you're buying their stock. Auburn. Hugh Freeze comes into town, and you're liking the case for War Eagle.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, look, you may like him and you may not like him. That's fine. You don't have to like him, but he's Hugh Freeze and he knows how to recruit the South and he knows how to coach football, right? If you saw what he did with Ole Miss, bringing them up from what wasn't necessarily a respected program, not anything terrible, but not respected by any means. He beat Bama a couple times. Like he put them in a really good position to succeed there at Ole Miss, and he did some really good things while he was there. Obviously, did some not necessarily good by the NCAA's book things as well, and that's what ended up getting him fired. Otherwise, he'd probably still be coaching there. But to Auburn, they don't really care about that anymore. That's their coach. You don't need a guy who's necessarily squeaky clean. You need a guy who can recruit the South and a guy who can, coach ball and get you back in the win column a little bit more frequently. I also think it was a huge deal retaining Cadillac Williams and keeping him on staff and being able to keep some of that culture that we saw towards the end of the year. And some of the buy-in from the players, I think that went a long way towards keeping things rolling at Auburn, because they did finish the season on a little bit of a high note, right? It wasn't necessarily a great season for them. Obviously, you see your head coach get fired in the middle of the season. Things probably aren't going super well for you. But they were able to kind of surge a little bit at the end of the year and show some promise and show some, some players that could do some stuff. I think Georgia being as good as they are also helps Auburn kind of indirectly because it breaks up that stranglehold that Alabama has on the SEC. I think Georgia winning it back to back kind of shows, hey, maybe Bama's not there anymore. Maybe they're not invincible anymore. And I think that that'll only go to crack stuff. You if you're Auburn, yes, you play Georgia every year, but you were already playing Bama every year, so who cares if it switches, right? Who cares if it's just the other team wearing red that is going to be the dominant team in the conference? Where that helps you is it breaks up your state specifically, and then the surrounding states like Florida, like Mississippi, and it gives you a better chance to recruit those guys and prove that maybe you can be back in the conversation for your own state. And I think Freeze will get those guys on campus. I think he's going to help them, kind of get back to a good point. And with the new look SEC, whatever that looks like, with a pod schedule, with the 3-6-6, with whatever that looks like, I think Auburn's in as good a spot as most teams in that conference. I'm not going to say as anybody, but in as good a spot as most teams to take advantage of that and really capitalize on whatever the new landscape ends up looking like.
Mhm.
I think y'all are right that Auburn's stock is up because it couldn't go any lower than it was this year.
Sure.
Man, am I alone in not getting the hype behind Hugh Freeze? Because I know that he had all the recruiting classes at Ole Miss. Obviously, we know how he got those recruiting classes at Ole Miss. He did pretty well at Liberty when he had Malik Willis, but the fewest games he's ever lost as a coach in the SEC is still 3. So I don't know, man. Like, I know that that's a big deal. I know that, everybody was really hyped, and the NCAA sanctions, when they came in, that obviously killed any momentum that he had at Ole Miss. But
Sure.
I don't know. Like, I just am really interested to see. He kind of seems like a retread to me. Like, I don't know that I would be crazy excited if I was an Auburn fan that Hugh Freeze is leading me. Obviously, I'd be more excited than, where we've been in the past for Auburn, but
Sure.
I don't know, man.
I think compared to Brian Harsin and a hire that made 0 sense, Hugh
Yeah.
Freeze makes sense for
He at
Auburn.
least has coached in the
Yeah.
South and can
Yeah.
recruit down here.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Like you said, Garrett.
I think that's where the excitement comes in. I still don't know if Auburn wins more than 6 games this year, just because comparatively, I think that they should be a ways behind some of the other schools, right? Even Mississippi State, even A&M that didn't make a bowl game this year. On-field talent, they're behind those schools. And so it's hard for me to sit back and say, oh yeah, I feel good about Auburn going better than 6-6, but I do think overall we've bottomed out, and now we should see some sort of upward momentum. Trey, take us out west. You are loving the Red Raiders. We as a podcast are loving the Red Raiders. We have been since the preseason. Tell us why it is stock up for Texas Tech.
Yeah, guys. So if you've listened to this show at all in the last year, you know that we are very high on the Red Raiders. We didn't know how year one was going to go under Joey Mack, but he just far outseated anybody's expectations, I think. I know we were having them hopefully making a bowl game. They obviously made one, had a little bit of cushion, and then just
7-5,
all over Ole Miss in that Texas Bowl. It was awesome to see. Guys, Joey Mack, man, those vibes are as high as they've been on the Plains since, 2008 when Graham Harrell was hitting Michael Crabtree. So yeah. I'm really excited to see where he can take this program for a couple of reasons. Number one, he's recruiting really, really well. And he's doing, I mean this in the least disrespectful way possible to Texas Tech. But he's doing what Texas Tech should do on the recruiting trail. He's grinding. He's finding the under-the-radar guys that normally are going to be overlooked by Oklahoma, by Texas A&M, and by LSU and Alabama. There's so many programs that want to get the 5- and 4-star guys that Tech is just not going to be at the top of that pecking order. But he's going and getting the top of that next level. Mm-hmm. And it's recruiting dividends. You're seeing the results on the recruiting trail. They were top 25 this year for the first time in a while. And it's really, really exciting to see now that he's actually getting the talent that he wants. And he's working his tail off on the recruiting trail. Yeah, he knows Texas. And that's huge to recruiting the Lone Star State. It's going to be huge for the future there. And guys, like we've mentioned so many times on this podcast, and like I'll mention when we get to our stock down, this new Big 12 is wide, wide, wide open when Texas and Oklahoma leave now in 2024. So now we're getting that a year earlier. Mm-hmm. Who knows how the schedule is going to look? Who knows what that's going to look like? But Tech is going to be one of the teams in position, I think, from a resources standpoint, from an off-the-field standpoint. Who else in the Big 12 is going to be better positioned than Texas Tech from an intangibles and a program standpoint? Other than location, obviously Lubbock is a little tough to get to, and that's always going to be something that they have to fight against on the recruiting trail. But from a financial standpoint, from a passionate fan base standpoint, from an NIL standpoint, they are killing it right now. I don't think any other school in the new Big 12 is going to outwork Texas Tech.
Well, yeah, that's what they've made their name on doing so far under Joey Mack, is just out-identifying guys, right? I mean, cornerback Calvin Simpson-Hunt ended up as a 4-star out of Waxahachie, went to Ohio State. Texas Tech offered him before he even had a star to his name because they loved the way that he was an athlete. They loved the raw skills, the intangibles that he brought, and said, hey, we'll teach you how to play cornerback. Well, as he finished out his junior season into his senior season, which had another very successful senior season at Waxahachie, other schools started to see, oh, wait, shoot, even though this guy doesn't have any stars, he's really, really good. And the recruiting services finally watched some film on him, and now, lo and behold, he ends up as a 4-star. Now, he doesn't end up committing to Texas Tech. He backs off that pledge and goes up to Columbus, but it's that kind of concept where Joey Mack's gonna steal some gems, right? He's going to win on guys that everyone else just doesn't pay attention to because they don't have enough stars next to their name. And that's how Joey Mack's going to build this program, and I'm really excited to watch.
Well, and the big reason he can do that is because he has those high school relationships, right? Where he has the relationships with the high school coaches, with people that still work in the high schools. And even if it's not necessarily those guys directly, he can get, friend of a friend said and that, because he has those connections and he knows who to trust. He knows who knows ball, who's going to look for the guys he's looking for. So he can call up a couple guys, say, hey, is there anybody in the Metroplex that we're kind of overlooking? And we can say, hey, is there a good wide receiver there? Because I'm looking to fill out my class. Or, he can go down and talk to some guys. Hey, is there anybody in San Antonio I need to be looking out for? And, and kind of just make some contacts because he has those contacts.
Sure.
Right? And so I think that's going to be one of their biggest reasons they succeed, is because not only, like you guys were saying, like with the new look Big 12 and everything shifting and all that, but also just, taking into account the fact that, yeah, even recruiting against teams like A&M and Texas and State, I think they're going to have some real success in keeping things going on the recruiting trail just because of the relationships that he has.
Completely agree. I'm really excited to watch what Tech does. I don't know quite what their ceiling is. I don't know that anybody does, but hey, after beating Texas, Joey Mack said the road through the Big 12 runs through Lubbock, right? And I would love for that to have some real truth to it.
Gracious, how about